Jai Shri Radhe. Sab Vaishnavan ko Jai Shri Krishna. Today is the 56th day of our reading of the 252 Vaishnava Varta, and commencing today with Varta 35, the story of one Sanodiya Brahmin who lived in Vraja. Part 1. This Sanodiya Brahmin came to Sri Gosaiji and asked to be granted a name initiation. Sri Gosaiji blessed him by doing so. The Brahmin had a sister. He went to her house, where she welcomed him in very lovingly. She was very, very wealthy. Seeing this wealth, the Brahmin poisoned her, and she died. Then he took all her jewellery and money for himself. The next morning her in-laws performed her last rites, and they knew that her brother had killed her, but they were polite people, did not say anything about this incident. It was not long before that Brahmin also died. He was reborn as a poisonous snake and lived on Mai Ghat between Mathura and Gokul. The snake would run after anyone who came there, and soon no one would dare to go there. Sri Gosaiji was on his way to Mathura and stopped there at Mai Ghat and set up camp near that snake's hole. Seeing all those people, the snake retreated to its hole, awaiting a chance to bite someone. It was full of anger. There Sri Gosaiji asked for a pot of water to be brought with which to wash his feet. The water in which he had washed his feet trickled down into the snake's hole and touched it, and he drank it. It permeated through his whole body. Then he remembered his previous birth. The snake emerged from its hole and prostrated to Sri Gosaiji by bowing its hood. Sri Gosaiji put his foot on its hood, and at that very moment the snake was transformed back into the Brahmin's body. All the Vaishnavas assembled there were surprised. Sri Gosaiji then initiated him with the Lord's name and Brahmasambandh. He then died, but this time he had been uplifted and liberated. The Vaishnavas also all asked Sri Gosaiji who that Brahmin had been and why he had such a destiny. Sri Gosaiji explained that he had been a soul in the eternal Leela, whose name was Tamas Devi, who was of Tamasi disposition. She was part of Rohini's group of Sakhis. In the Damodar Leela, when Sri Yashodadi was trying to bind Sri Krishna with rope, this Tamas Devi had brought the rope to her. Rohini had found this out and cursed her to fall to earth. In this way, she had been born as a Sanodiya Brahmin who had become greedy for his sister's wealth, and so killed her for it by giving her poison. Therefore, he was reborn as a poisonous snake. However, he had surrendered to me, and so when she was touched by the foot water, she was liberated from that snake's body. Therefore, she was reborn as a poisonous snake. However, she had surrendered to me, and so when she was touched by the foot water, was liberated from that snake's body. When the Vaishnavas heard Sri Gosaiji tell this story, they all felt happy and praised their own fate, saying, "We have taken shelter in Sri Gosaiji, and so we will also certainly be uplifted." Bhav Prakash. Why? Because Sri Gosaiji is the Supreme Lord himself. An embodied soul achieves liberation just by surrendering to him. In the path of grace, it is well known that the Lord saves souls through his unique and special power of grace. He is not concerned with their trying through various actions to please him. Thus he is most compassionate. Thus concludes Varta 35, the story of a Brahmin who was the recipient of Sri Gosaiji's great grace and an accomplished Vaishnava, whom Sri Gosaiji uplifted simply through his grace. There is, in reality, no end to his story. Now, Varta 36, the story of a mother, son and daughter-in-law from Gujarat. Bhav Prakash. In the eternal Leela, the mother is a Sakhi of Sri Vishakaji named Shyama. Shyama has a Sakhi named Ramde, who comes to her as a son. The daughter-in-law is a Sakhi of Sri Rohiniji named Shyama Snehini, whose mind is absorbed day and night into Sri Thakurji. She runs around Nanda's palace like one crazed in love. That is how she got her name. She is most dear to Sri Rohiniji and belongs to her group and has a sattvic disposition. Part 1. Sri Gosaiji travelled from Gokul to Gujarat. The mother and son came to him and humbly requested him to accept them as his disciples. He told them to go and bathe and return to him wearing fresh clothes. They did just that and stood before Sri Gosaiji with folded hands. He initiated them both with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandh and invited them to partake of prasad there. When Sri Gosaiji had partaken of his prasad, he served the two of them with his own hands. They both very joyfully accepted that prasad. Sri Gosaiji went to take a nap. When it was time for the afternoon Seva, Sri Gosaiji taught them both the ways of Seva for every day, each season, and for the festivals, thus greatly gracing them. The mother and son were granted the Seva of a Krishna Swarup, and they began to serve him. Not long after, he let them experience his personal presence. Sometime after the son got married, his wife was very simple. The son then went to live in one village, and one day Sri Gosaiji came there and set up camp just outside the village. The mother went to have his sight and requested him to also accept her daughter-in-law as his disciple. She then sent the daughter-in-law to Sri Gosaiji to receive the name initiation. She told her to repeat whatever Sri Gosaiji said to her, meaning the mantra. Sri Gosaiji said to her, "Come here and sit down." She then said to him, "Come here and sit down." Hearing this, Sri Gosaiji laughed and realized she was very simple. Then Sri Gosaiji went close to her and repeated the 8-syllable mantra to her 3 times. The daughter-in-law then also pronounced the 8-syllable mantra. Someone went to the mother-in-law and told her what had happened. She went to Sri Gosaiji and apologized for any offence that may have occurred, and then had him grant the daughter the Brahma Sambandh initiation. He then told the mother-in-law to let the girl participate in the Lord's Seva. She objected, saying that the girl was too simple to understand the ways of Seva, but he replied that the Lord himself would teach her what to do. Bhav Prakash. Why? Because she was very simple. Through the initiation, she was now firmly linked to the eternal Leela, and so Sri Thakurji would himself connect with her. Part 1 continued. Some days later, the mother-in-law had to sit out of Seva because she had her monthly period, and so she told the girl to dress up Sri Thakurji and show him the mirror. She said she would know if Sri Thakurji was pleased with her, if he smiled. Having said this, the mother-in-law went to sit by the river. The daughter-in-law dressed him up, but he did not smile at her, so she started all over again. Still he did not smile. She did this all over again 8 times, and on the last go, the Lord smiled. Why? In the Pushti Marg, the Bhav Prakash. Why? In the Pushti Marg, the Lord only grants his experience to those who truly long for him. To increase her loving anguish, he made her repeat the adornment 8 times. She was exhausted and felt sorrow. This made her long for him, and so he then graced her with his smile. Part 1 continued. After this, the Lord would always happily play with her. She experienced him in this way. She would say to him, "If I make a mistake in the Seva, I shall go back to my mother's house." She was so simple, she would do exactly as Sri Thakurji told her. On the 5th day, the mother-in-law again bathed and entered the Seva. She sat down to adorn the Lord. However, she began to feel very sleepy. Sri Thakurji said, "I very much prefer the way your daughter-in-law adorns me, so please, you do the cooking and let her dress and adorn me." From that day onwards, the daughter-in-law always dressed and adorned the Lord. The Lord laughed and joked with her and let her experience all sorts of divine loving sentiments towards him. Thus concludes Varta 36, the story of the mother-in-law, her son and daughter-in-law, who were the recipients of Sri Gosaiji's great grace and accompanied Vaishnavas. There is no end to their story. Thus concludes the reading for today. Sab Vaishnavan ko sadar saprem. Jai Shri Krishna, Shri Gosaiji, Param Dayalu. Jai Ho, Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe.